South Korea's Busan may consider bidding for the 2035 World Expo as Saudi Arabia's Riyadh is selected to host the 2030 event. Meanwhile, on the peninsula, North Korea restores military measures along the inter-Korean border following a satellite mission that was strongly condemned during separate summits between President Yoon Suk-yeol and his British and French counterparts, respectively. Hello and welcome. It's Thursday here in Korea and you're watching Issues and Insiders. Now today, I have our panel of foreign journalists touching upon a number of recent developments. And for this, I have Steven Borowiec here in the studio. Steven, good to have you back.
Nice to be here as always.
I also have Nicolas Rocca. Nicolas, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Right then, Nicolas, let's begin with a few words on the result of the vote in Paris for the 2030 World Expo that took place at the International Bureau of Expositions. How do you respond to the result?
Well, it wasn't the result that Korea was hoping for. It was a landslide for Saudi Arabia, Riyadh earning 119 votes, I believe. So there was no second round because there were 3 contenders, and the Saudi Arabian bid earned 2/3 of the votes. I mean, I think the campaign had the benefits to put Busan on the map. There's been, intense advertising in the streets of Paris, taxis, for instance, talking about Busan. So I think people are now aware, that Busan is on the map. But it raises a lot of questions for Korea on the way that the campaign was approached. Was it the useful way, focusing mostly, on the Korean culture? Obviously, Saudi Arabia took a different direction, and it worked. And I think it raises also the question: does South Korea need this expo in Busan? It's already a global powerhouse in so many industries, economically speaking, culturally speaking. What does it bring more to the table now that we've seen that it won't work? There's already talks about Busan, bidding for 2035. So we'll see. But I think, there's a lot of questions to be asked on the budget, on the way this campaign was made, and just the usefulness of such a campaign.
Right. Well, despite the result of that vote, Stephen, ahead of it, though, there was Japan placing its weight behind Busan's bid for the 2030 World Expo. How do you explain this show of support?
I think the Foreign Ministry described this as, in the recent foreign ministers meeting between Korea and Japan, this being a kind of outcome of President Yoon's decision to initiate rapprochement with Japan over the past year or so, despite knowing that this would be a fairly unpopular move at home. So trickles out of the Japanese side indicate that within Prime Minister Kishida's camp, there's a lot of people who are really kind of almost touched or really kind of appreciative that Yoon would make a kind of bold step, knowing that he would face political backlash at home, knowing that he's operating in a situation where the opposition has pretty firm control of the National Assembly and his approval ratings are not that high. And as president, he's just kind of, Yoon's reputation is that he's a very principle-driven sort of guy. He's a former prosecutor, and if he believes in something, if he believes in the correctness of his own path, he will just forge ahead and he'll go ahead and do what he thinks is right. And we can speculate as to, just why better ties with Japan are as important with him as they appear to be. He spent time in Japan when he was young. I believe his father was a visiting scholar or something like that there. And he seems to believe that, he has close relationships with a lot of corporations and a lot of, kind of the business community in Korea who have long been calling for better trade ties and smoother interactions with Japan. And so there's a strong incentive there. And this could be one thing, if that is true, if that is the accurate explanation, this could be something that would be very important for Yoon in that he can now say to the South Korean, even though Busan didn't win this bid, if he could say, here, having Japan on our side is beneficial to our own national interests in this way. If we have cordial ties with Japan, we can work together and we can have the backing of Japan, which I think is the 3rd largest economy in the world, as we pursue our own national interests on the global stage. And throughout the rest of Yoon's term, I think he will be keen to demonstrate these kinds of benefits to the public.
Right, indeed. Nicholas, meanwhile, on the security front, North Korea, it has put up a spy satellite into orbit, and following that, it has scrapped a security pact with South Korea signed back in 2018 and vowed to, and I quote, restore all military measures. What or how concerned should we be about this latest stance by North Korea?
Well, I mean, the Inter-Korean Agreement of 2018 had a series of measures with the aim of preventing any escalation near the border. There was, for instance, part of it was to remove landmines in some areas. That has been done quite swiftly right after the agreement. Removing guard posts inside the DMZ, close to the military demarcation line of both sides, 10 on both sides. We've seen North Korea refurbishing some of them, rebuilding some of them back up, and South Korea has said yesterday, I believe, that in the eastern parts of the DMZ, it will do the same, so in Gangwon region, basically. The two Koreas also agreed to remove some personnel, some heavy military equipment from the borders. We've already seen pictures of the North Korean army bringing back up some military personnel there. One very important part was the no-fly zone, so both Koreas agreed that there will be no flights near the military demarcation line. There were certain kilometer range that shouldn't be approached. This part of the deal, South Korea suspended it quite quickly after we got the news of the launch of the North Korean satellites. The Yoon administration had been quite vocal about this particular clause, because it meant for them that it could hurt the information that South Korea could have on what's going on the other side of the border. So this will see, the South Korean army conducting reconnaissance flights near the border, and then there were other parts of the deal that included, the border area on the seaside, and also limitation of live fire exercises, limitation of drills near the border. Since the 2018, we've seen part of that deal being non-respected, mostly by North Korea and sometimes by South Korea in answer for, North Koreans' actions. So it could be perceived as not much of a game changer. But even though it was not perfectly respected, I think it still created an atmosphere where there were some limits, and it could prevent some kind of accident that could happen at the border. And now that we're going to have more actions, more flights near the border, more troops with guns near the border, of course it raises the possibility of an unwanted accident.
Right, and talking about guns at the border, a lot of local reports here in the country. Of course, Steven was talking about how North Korean soldiers, while on duty in the truce village of Panmunjom, are now being rearmed with handguns, pistols, that is. That being said, Steven, what would you say the broader risks of this particular reality?
I think Nicola tapped on a key word there, and that is atmosphere. The atmosphere has changed a lot, and part of that is visual, part of that is just seeing guard posts and increasing signs of weaponry on both sides. You could make a pretty strong argument that the agreement of 2018, it did not really do much to de-escalate the actual military threat that North Korea poses. It did not make any significant reductions to the weaponry and the manpower and even their weapons of mass destruction campaigns. Those all stayed the same. I think it was mostly visuals, it was mostly atmospherics, it was mostly a kind of symbolic gesture that the two sides wanted to bring down tensions. And it made sense. I mean, you got to start, you have to take small steps toward a bigger goal. So it's disheartening for anyone who wants to see a lasting peace in this part of the world. It's discouraging to see the two sides both, reinstalling these guard posts and going back in the same direction of confrontation. But as to what it will mean for the near to kind of medium future, I think makes it even more likely that we'll see more high-powered U.S. assets here, big aircraft carriers and perhaps jet fighters, and I think the U.S. will be that much more motivated to demonstrate that Washington is committed to cooperating for South Korea's defense. We will probably see increasing strides from North Korea towards the development of more powerful weapons. A pretty significant step forward last week with the what they said was a successful satellite launch. So None of this is exactly new, but what we're going to see is a continuing of some ongoing trends. And we, as Nicola pointed out, we'll want to hope that we don't see the kind of inadvertent clashes that the two sides had been trying quite hard to prevent. We want to hope that, one of these soldiers who's carrying a handgun near the border doesn't make a gesture that the other side misperceives as threatening, and then that escalates into something that we don't want to see. I think the kind of underlying reality of the relations between North and South is still that both sides do want to avoid conflict. So let's hope that whatever fragile peace we have can stand.
Right, hopefully. Nicholas, what do you believe are the prospects now of perhaps a nuclear test by North Korea in the near future?
I mean, it's a million-dollar question.
It really
Since I've arrived in Korea in 2020, I've been hearing, that it's in the near future. It could be in the coming months. What we know is that there's been activity at the main testing sites. There's been satellite images of North Korea rebuilding tunnels in Punggye-ri, which is where most of this, the nuclear tests have been set. So we know that it could happen, probably any time, but what motivates North Korea to do or not do a nuclear test, I think, is out of our hands, because it answers to so many different rationales. There's the internal politic rationale. Perhaps that is one of the motivation we have almost no clue about. Because we we don't have any, sources close to the power in North Korea, so it's hard to know. There's a technical rationale. We have nuclear experts that, explain that there is a need for North Korea to do a nuclear test. It would be quite different than the 6 nuclear tests. The aim would be, I believe, according to the experts I've talked to be able to miniaturize the nuclear bombs in order to make it fit in the warheads. So there is a need for that test. And then there's also a geopolitical factor that could push North Korea to do or not do a nuclear test. On that side, things have changed immensely since the last time they did it. The negotiations with the United States and South Korea failed. They do not face concretely new sanctions at the United Nations Security Council, given their new relationship with Russia and the position of China. We don't know how those two countries would react in case of a nuclear test, but it seems less likely than before that there would be, heavy sanctions. Also, there's not a lot of additional sanctions to put on North Korea right now. So it depends on so many factors that it's really hard to imagine when it could happen. Also, one last thing is that once North Korea does this nuclear test, we don't see any more, escalating from there. Where could this go? It's kind of the last card in their deck, because, of course, it would raise, immense trouble for them. South Korea, the United States would obviously condemn quite strongly, but then where do we go from there? So I think it's really hard to tell when and where, and only a few people in the world actually knows when it's going to happen.
Right, unfortunately, one of them being Kim Jong-un probably. And staying with threats posed by North Korea, Stephen, experts here as well as over in the UK believe that cyber attacks by North Korea have become more elaborate. Do you care to explain this for us?
Well, I'm not a cyber or IT expert, so I'm perhaps not the best person to explain the nitty-gritty of exactly how North Korean hackers are taking control of third-party systems. But this has been, excuse me, this is something that's been going on for a long time, and this most recent report specifically flags that they're targeting software supply chain products, and that they are using sophisticated techniques to gain access to victims' systems. So this kind of makes sense when you think that the systems that North Korean hackers are using themselves are perhaps, under some kind of surveillance, or they face some kind of limitations as to what they can access on their own. So it would make sense for them to try to use surreptitious means to gain control of servers with different VPNs in different time zones and different places around the world to try to sort of camouflage their activities. For a regular viewer who's watching this, who might want to think, what the risk of this is, what this does, the risk that this does present is that you could have North Korean hackers using computers or using systems that are in other people's names, and perhaps burdening them with losses or trying some kind of convoluted way to cover their tracks. Since before the Korean War, the North Koreans have been into asymmetric tactics. That goes back to being on the battlefield when going up against larger and better equipped military. So this is an old thing. This is also the advantage of cyber attacks is also that they're quite plausibly deniable. The North Korea has a pretty easy path towards saying that either these are not carried out by North Korean hackers, or if they were, then these hackers were acting on their own. They were not following any kind of directive from the North Korean state. But as North Korea becomes increasingly tightly sanctioned, they have fewer and fewer paths to bringing in revenue. We just saw this week that there are reports that they're closing even more embassies. I think I saw a couple days ago that they closed their embassy in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and one or two other places. So that's an indication that the old sources of revenue are no longer bringing in the kind of money that they need. So they've got to increasingly look to other paths, other methods, other tactics, and cyber attacks and cryptocurrency and the sort of wild west of the dark corners of the web seem to be a place that they will increasingly look.
Right, and these activities by North Korea, they were denounced by President Yoon Suk-yeol and his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Paris last Friday. I believe they were touching on the broader threats posed by North Korea. Could you tell us a bit more about their summit and also the other issues on the table then?
Well, yeah, Emmanuel Macron basically reinstated the original French position on North Korea. France and North Korea don't have any diplomatic relation, and France has been historically standing on the South Korean sides of saying, just reinstating that France is pushing in favor of a total denuclearization of North Korea, and condemns strongly the recent North Koreans' activities. They met for breakfast as President Yoon came with a different type of executive from main Korean companies. The discussions were on many topics: car batteries, rechargeable batteries, advanced technologies, renewable energy, nuclear sector. Of course, France is relying a lot on the nuclear sector for its energy, and it's willing to provide solutions for South Korean nuclear wastes for its plants. Also, there were talks about cultural cooperation because there's been a deal that has been signed between Hanwha Foundation of Culture and the Pompidou Center to open a new branch here in Seoul by 2025. I believe there will be a Centre Pompidou branch in Seoul. So there's been talks about a lot of different projects, but I felt it lacked, a bigger, collective project, collective cooperation, and I feel that for that to happen, and I think President Yoon pushed for that again, there is a need for a French presidential visit in Seoul that has not been happening since 2015, and I think, that this could give the kind of momentum, state visits always give a momentum for bigger cooperation or bigger agreement between those two countries that have, a lot in common for some sector. For instance, in the defense sector, there are two big players. So yeah, I think that could be the next step if we want to see more, French-Korean cultural, economic, and defense cooperation.
Right, of course. And prior to his meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, President Yoon Suk-yeol was in London to meet with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and they signed the Downing Street Accord. What, Stephen, do you believe are some of the important takeaways from that particular accord?
But what a cool name. It's called the Downing Street Accord. It sounds like a Jean Le Carré novel or something. It's quite common that when President Yoon or other Korean presidents travel, they come away with these agreements and they lay out in pretty broad strokes areas that the two sides have agreed to cooperate. In this case, they talked about London and Seoul striking a strategic cyber partnership to work together towards cybersecurity and the smooth and safe movement of things in cyberspace. And also they agreed to work together on defense industry exports. The Yoon administration has made a real point of growing South Korea's profile as a manufacturer and an exporter of defense industry goods. But the broader, beyond the finer details of the agreement, I just think this fits into the Yoon administration's broader pattern of expanding partnerships with what it likes to call like-minded countries. These are democracies. These are states that work according to the rule of law and free exchange of goods and ideas and movement of people. And this goes back again, I think, to Yoon's orientation as a principle-driven sort of a leader. He seems to have looked around the world and selected partners on the basis of these are places that he feels South Korea can cooperate in a kind of reliable way. You know, these are, if you have international, you know, there's a lot of cynicism when it comes to international relations, you know, the idea that everybody is ultimately just working toward their own self-interest. But if you do have partnerships like the partnership that South Korea has with the United States that are not just based on short-term transactions, but are based on the idea that these countries have something more meaningful in common, that they believe in the same things, that they want to see a world that looks a certain way, then these partnerships, I think, can be more durable over time. So I think it makes sense for Yoon to go places like the UK and France and make a point of saying that he is determined to cooperate with these countries on the basis of shared beliefs and shared interests. And I think he's making progress in expanding South Korea's ability to export not just its high technology or durable goods, but its culture, and to just kind of, in this growing era of polarization where there's this, you know, there's a kind of world order that's being led by China and one led by democracies, I think Yoon he's really been quite decisive in saying that he wants this country to be on the side that believes in things like the rule of law and a rules-based international order, however imperfect that may be.
Right. Well, he has been talking about the importance of connections based on common values. And now that he's made a state visit to the UK, perhaps we can have the French president here in South Korea in the near future with you covering it. All right, then. Well, that is all the time we have for this edition. Stephen, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
My pleasure.
And Nicolas, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. Be sure to join us same time tomorrow for talks with an expert who believes greater involvement of men in caregiving may facilitate gender equality and more. Thank you for now.